Hello and welcome to the first session of my parenting sessions, and today we will be discussing feelings. In my first step, the baseline for play therapy and parenting is acknowledging feelings, validating feelings. The researchers Tina Bryson and Dan Siegel came up with the term name it to tame it. Name that feeling. There are some that feel better than others, like happy, excited, proud, silly, and there's some that don't feel so good, like mad or sad. But we want to communicate that all feelings are accepted. What's not okay are sometimes the reactions we have, like when we're angry, kicking something, hitting a sibling, throwing toys. That is not acceptable, but the feeling is. So we want to definitely communicate that. So the first step of any parenting skill is acknowledge the feeling. You just state what you see. And I usually send out worksheets from the child-parent relationship training workbook. Kind of look like this. These are examples of noticing these feelings with your child, and I have examples written down. And then this worksheet is for you to notice what you see in your child, an example, and how you would respond. So you're basically saying, you look really happy right now, or you're really excited about blah, 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 or you're sad that such and such happened. That's all you're doing. You're stating the feeling. You're not judging. You're not saying, but you should have done this. And just name the feeling. And so when our brains are on fire and the kid's all riled up and angry and throwing things, you just want to name, oh, you look really mad right now. And just by naming it, our brains can slowly calm down. That's why it's called name it to tame it. Sometimes you might get a little repetitive with the feeling words, and we want to build our child's emotional vocabulary. So you can find these online, or I can send one to you. This is the feelings wheel with the basic ones in the middle. Then they branch out to a few more options, and then the third level is very much more detailed. As an example, let's see, loving turns into affectionate, adoration, you feel connected, you're caring, and it goes even further to friendly, fondness, admiration, close, loved. So that's another resource you can use when you're acknowledging the feeling. So again, you want to just acknowledge what you see. Oh, you look really sad right now. But we also want to acknowledge the good ones. So they're building their emotional vocabulary with not just the negative feelings, but the positive ones, like happy, sad, excited, surprised, all of those. So as an example, I always say, oh, you look really happy right now. I see a smile on your face. That tells me you're happy. And you go from there. So just naming the feeling, you feel validated, you feel heard. Another book that I always recommend, and I'm sure I've told you about, is How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. This is the one for little kids. This is the one for, I don't know, I'd even say grown-ups down to birth. But this is for the little kids. And so the temper tantrums, things like that, the very first step they have is, they call it the toolbox. The very first toolbox step is acknowledge feelings with words. And, they use examples in here like, let's see, all feelings can be accepted, again, like I said, but actions need to be limited. So they have little cartoons in here to kind of help you kind of judge or give you ideas. And I'll just show you this quick little one. This kid wants some ice cream. The ice cream shop is closed. So the not so great reaction is when the kid says, you promised ice cream, Dad, no fair. And the dad says, stop whining, or we'll just have to come back tomorrow and go home right now. And the kid stomps, but I want it now. And the dad says, stop that, or you won't even get ice cream tomorrow either. So let's look at the positive response, or the more validating one, I should say, is when the kid says, you promised me ice cream, no fair. The dad says, that's so disappointing. You were really looking forward to ice cream and the store is closed. Then the kid feels heard. Yeah, I really wanted chocolate. And he calmly walks away. And the dad says, oh, chocolate's your favorite. And then it goes on to where you can acknowledge feelings with writing it, and then art, like show me how disappointed you are. So you give them a piece of paper, or with writing, you know what? The dad says, I'm going to go home and write this down so we don't forget. And I want sprinkles too, says the little kid. And the dad's like, okay, I'll add the word sprinkles to this. So that's kind of, like I said, these are my Bibles. And then they have step-by-step instructions after each chapter to kind of help summarize. Basically, it says, listen. Say, acknowledge the feeling with a word. And you can use even phrases like, oh, those kind of responses that us humans use. And then give the feeling a name it to tame it. That sounds so frustrating. And then the fourth is you can also give the wish and fantasy like that father did. Like, I wish I could make the banana right for you right now. So remember, all feelings can be accepted It's just the actions and reactions that are not. And the next session, I'll go into limit setting, but the basis is you acknowledge the feeling or the fantasy or the wish. Second, you state the limit. Third, you redirect them. And the example I always use is painting. A kid wants to paint on the wall. Oh, it looks so fun. You would really enjoy painting on the wall right now, but walls are not for painting on. Paper's for painting on. So you set the limit, walls are not for painting on, and you do the directive. But first, acknowledge the feeling. They will feel heard and they will feel understood. Just feeling validated does wonders, and adults can practice this too. Because imagine, I always use the example as well, when the grown-up comes home from a long day at work, their boss yelled at them, and their spouse, they say to their spouse, oh, it's had the worst day at work. And the spouse says, okay, well, can you come in and help me set the table? Does that person feel heard or validated? No, and it makes their anger probably even get bigger. And they're just like, oh my God, like they don't feel understood, and that can be very hurtful. But if instead the spouse gets home and says, and then the spouse back to them says, well, wow, it sounds like your boss was really mean to you, or that must have been really hard. Sounds like you've had a really long day, things like that. And you're like, yeah, I did. And you just feel understood. And you, honestly, I feel loved and cared for when people validate my feelings. And another thing I'll go into too real quick before the session ends is the word, or the question I should say, why? The word why. So let's say a child threw a toy across the room. Children are very impulsive. They do things without thinking sometimes. And if you ask them, why'd you throw that? Half the time they don't know. They literally do not know. It's just a reaction. But when we go to them and be like, why'd you throw that? It makes people feel defensive, like putting their arms up. And adults the same way. If a spouse comes to you like, why'd you park your car like that in the garage? Or why didn't you take the trash out last night? You're kind of like, well, geez, you feel picked on. You feel like a little child and your parent is disciplining you, right? You get really defensive. Well, I had to do blah, blah, blah. So try to think of other ways to communicate that. So if your child throws something like, you look really angry, you just threw that toy. And then you can say something like, I saw that you just threw that toy and you must have been really angry. Tell me what was going on. And again, sometimes I don't even know. But try whatever words, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, to use other ways of getting around that question. Not why did you do that? Because I also feel bad about doing something. So say, let's talk about stereotypical gender roles. Say a boy chose to paint a picture or draw a picture with a pink marker, crown, or paint. And the parent's like, why'd you use pink to draw that car? Why didn't you use blue? Why didn't you? And then the kid feels bad. It was like, they're just expressing themselves through art. I mean, they have no idea. They just maybe like the color. So that why can also make them feel less than. So I try to encourage that as well. But back to the basic lesson. Again, you can go home with anything today. All I could say is validate, acknowledge that feeling. And then we will go from there next time.